What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical average American here today to react and learn about ways Norwegian culture is different to the United States. And what I'm very excited about is that Norwegians are going to answer this question. How is Norway different to the United States? What parts of Norwegian culture are the most different? So I found this discussion here on Reddit where someone was asking, what are cultural differences between Norway and the US I should be aware of? This was a question asked by an American who has a Norwegian boyfriend, and they are trying to get a better understanding of what cultural differences they can expect and be aware of between them and their partner. I've known him for 3 years, but finding there are still differences between dating in the US and Norway, marriage between Norway and the US. Can anyone please talk about differences? So, a bunch of Norwegians chimed in and gave their opinion and their expertise on things in Norway that are very unique. So, we have here Norwegians tend to be easily likable, but hard to get to know, as our inner circles are hard to get into. Right, it's really interesting. I think that makes it kind of tough for foreigners to move to Norway and to make friends. But if you do become friends with someone in Norway, you are set. You're like, when you're in, you're really in. You have a very dedicated, loyal friend group. The only problem is it can be a little tough to get into that friend group to begin with. Many, both expats and Norwegians, struggle getting friends when moving to a new place. Okay, I mean, that can happen in America sometimes. Like, people become friends with people they've known their whole life, and sometimes it can be hard to meet new people as an adult, especially. Personal space is huge. Talking to or standing close to strangers in Norway is considered weird and inappropriate. See, that's very different to the United States because Americans will get into your personal space like all the time, actually, especially in big cities where people are walking around and maybe taking the bus or subway, and Americans really don't consider others very much. So that's also a big, there's kind of less respect involved. So yeah, I'm never surprised when people are in my personal space in America. As it is bothering to others, and we don't like to be a bother. Yeah, exactly. I love that about Norway. That's so nice, and it's such a great philosophy to have as a culture. But Americans don't think about that at all. Like, Americans are basically taught to worry about yourself, take care of yourself. Not really a community feeling that's taught very much, unfortunately. So, yeah, Americans don't really think about how they're affecting other people, I guess. One of the most quiet places you can find in Norway outside of rush hour is public transportation. Yeah, Americans are playing their music or on their phone or talking to strangers. It honestly sounds very, very different. So that's good advice. If an American is marrying a Norwegian, it's kind of funny because the cultures are actually not quite opposite, but they're very, very different. Very different. It's kind of fun though. It's fun to have such a diversity of cultures though. I'm a Norwegian who's married to an American, and in the process of getting to know each other's cultures, it has long been clear to us that there are quite a few cultural differences, fairly major ones, that occasionally amount to chasms. Wow. So, Americans who are married to Norwegians may even find that some of the differences in culture are so massive, it can cause really big misunderstandings and maybe even problems. American culture is a lot more about the individual, responsibility for the self. Exactly, yes. While Norwegian culture is a lot more about the individual as a responsible member of society. with moral obligations towards other members of society. That is so fantastic, man. I really wish America was a little bit more like Norway in this regard. I feel like as a society, we would be so much better off being more respectful towards each other. We would get more done. We could probably work together better. So yeah, I love that. But it's so tough to change an entire attitude towards life for a whole culture. So I don't see that changing in America very well. Americans basically think it's a good thing to take care of yourself. Make your way in this world. Be special. You know, that's what we're taught is important. But there's a lot of other things that are important, like getting along with others and being productive, a productive member of society. I like that. I like that phrase. Norwegian culture has virtually no nudity taboo. Wow. Few taboos around sex. Wow, that's so different. It is strange because America is like kind of so out there and Americans are so strange and opinionated. And yet in America you cannot show nudity on television or movies or internet. You can't show sex. You can't really talk about sex. It's very taboo. Um, Whereas Norway sounds like that's all just open and normal, which I've always thought like in America, I agree with the fact that you really shouldn't talk too much about sex to children, small children. But once you're going through maturity and adolescence and becoming a teenager and older, you should start learning about sex in a healthy way. And the nudity and all that stuff, like, it's definitely kind of funny how taboo it is in America. And yet America will show violence and murder and death in TV shows. That's all fine. So that is very strange, isn't it? No assumption that casual physical touch is sexual. Oh, yeah, Norwegians are just a lot more pure. Like a lot more innocent, basically, is a good way to say it. Because in America, if you touch somebody, that can definitely be construed as inappropriate, as sexual. It's strange. It's so strange how that things work. Yeah, Norway sounds a lot more open-minded in that regard. Optimism and hopefulness is a moral obligation in the US. Pessimism and skepticism is the outlook in Norway. Yeah. Wow. There are so many interesting differences between how Norwegians view the world and view life and how Americans view life. Yeah, in America, we are taught, like, you have to be positive and optimistic and confident. You got to be confident and you can accomplish anything. But it'd be almost be better if we could be more realistic about stuff because it leads to a lot of disappointment for a lot of Americans, I think. When you find out that you can't just do anything, you have to, it's a lot of hard work and focus, and a lot of ideas don't work, and you gotta be realistic about stuff. Which sounds like is much more of the Norwegian attitude, you could say. But I have to admit, I do enjoy that America is full of really confidence and optimism, and it also can be a positive thing. It can help you get stuff done that you might have been too scared to do or too worried about. Americans will tend to just kind of go for it blindly, which can be a big strength or a weakness. Just it's kind of both. I don't know. I don't know if there's a best way about that. But it's interesting how America and Norway are almost on the opposite side of that argument, huh? Politeness in the United States is about being openly and warmly welcoming and inclusive of other people in your life. Politeness in Norway is about respecting other people's right to not have their lives interrupted and imposed by you. Fascinating. This is really great. These are really great comments. These are really great. Very insightful, very specific. But I love it. It's really looking at the attitudes of Norwegians versus Americans, and it's fascinating. Yeah, United States politeness is about being open and welcoming and just talking to everyone and including everyone. But in Norway, that could be construed as being rude because politeness in Norway is giving everyone their space, being respectful. It's it's so interesting. If you talk too loud in public, you're being rude. If you chat away to your coworker, you're being rude. They're trying to concentrate. Interesting, interesting. Time is more valuable commodity in Norway than money. The vast majority of Norwegians would a million times rather have an extra week of vacation rather than an extra week of income. Interesting. Americans are definitely taught to value money. That's definitely true. Definitely. Americans are totally value money and are willing. Yeah, that is. But I have to say, I think a lot of people, especially wealthy people, once you don't have to worry about money, always tend to say time is more valuable. But I think you need enough money to have your basic needs met, and then you start worrying about time. Because time is the one thing you cannot get back. You can't pay for more time. So that is interesting. It's probably very wise for Norwegians to prioritize time, for sure. You make emotional connections in Norway by spending time together. It is very, very, very easy for an American to come on too strong by oversharing personal stuff too early. Oh, that's interesting. That's actually good advice for Americans. Don't come on too strong. Wow. Yeah, in America, it's considered that you're very personable and likable if you're very open and honest. If you're being vulnerable, it's seen as being trustworthy. But in Norway, I think that comes across as insincere because the only real way to gain trust in a relationship is consistently by demonstrating that trustworthiness over time. You need time. So I actually really appreciate that. I think Americans do come on a bit too strong, but a lot of us enjoy it, and Americans do appreciate openness and honesty above all. So I could see where other cultures could just see that as a bit too much, a little too much too soon. Don't wear shoes indoors. Yeah. Americans do need to hear this. I'm thankful to say a lot of Americans do take their shoes off in people's houses, although some Americans don't. Not all the time. We definitely keep our shoes on in restaurants and at work in places. Do Norwegians take their shoes off anytime they're indoors? Or wearing shoes in someone's house is a sign of disrespect? In America, it's kind of hit or miss. Most Americans would like you to take your shoes off in the house, but some don't. So yeah, it's a little different. If you plan on driving, always stop for pedestrians at marked crosswalks. Well, this is funny because Americans always drive and there's no pedestrians because we don't have to worry about this. There's no pedestrians. Because there's no one out walking. Americans don't walk. We drive everywhere, so we don't have to worry about this very much. Unless you live in a big American city, then there's pedestrians you have to stop at. But in America, in smaller towns, no one is out walking, so you don't even have to worry. You are going to assume his Norwegian friends and family don't like you. Trust me, if you don't, you'll know. Oh, because Norwegians, it takes time to get close and to open up. So an American might assume that a Norwegian's family doesn't like them because they're not opening up so quickly like an American family might. But in Norway, it's just normal. So that is actually very important to know if you're going to marry a Norwegian, for sure. They aren't going to throw around all the typical American platitudes or compliments. If, for instance, a Norwegian says, "We should meet up sometime," they really mean it. Because in America, sometimes Americans are just nice for no reason and not sincere. Like, just nice and don't really mean what they're saying, which kind of reinforces the Norwegian way of building up relationships slowly. Because Americans do tend to exaggerate and say stuff like, "Oh, we should get dinner sometime," even though they don't really mean it. They're just being nice, which is actually being kind of rude when you think about it. It's an open invitation for you to start suggesting format, like dinner or drinks. Interesting. It is not a way of saying you are a decent human being, so I won't run away from you if we meet again, like it does in Norway. Outside of open house parties, people in Norway will never invite you to their home unless they consider you an actual good friend. Interesting. Americans will definitely invite people to parties and stuff that they don't know, but that can happen in Norway with parties. So in Norway, if you're invited into their home, that's a very big compliment, a big show of trust and friendship. That's a little stronger than in America. I think Americans invite people into their home that aren't necessarily their best friends, so that's interesting. Being invited to a home is a huge compliment. Wow, okay. That's interesting. That is a bit different. I'd recommend the Social Guidebook to Norway. Simple drawings. Oh, there's a Norwegian culture guidebook? What? What on earth? Wait, this teaches you about Norwegian culture? It's like a guidebook. What? Okay, that's interesting. I might have to actually take a look at that sometime. Someone made an entire guidebook to Norwegian culture and how it's different. And it's in little drawings, too. All right, cool. That's actually fantastic. I'm going to look at that sometime. I've had some friends over to Norway. Usually take them to my cabin and we walk up a few mountains. It usually goes like this. So we are going to walk up there? Yes. Why? Because it's nice. It might take hours to walk up there. Yes. And what do we do at the top? We go back down. Why? Americans don't really see the point in walking just for walking. Yes. That is very true. These are Middle Eastern people, though, probably more common in the US. Kinda. Some Americans do enjoy hiking, and I think the beauty and the newness of Norway would get Americans walking and enjoying the scenery and the hike and the cabin. But here in America, Americans don't really enjoy walking very much. But I think they'd like to walk in Norway. That'd be a whole different experience. People would walk more in America if it were as beautiful as Norway, for sure. We don't marry early in Norway. Like, people are together, living for many years without marrying. Yeah, I wonder what the average age of getting married is in Norway. In America, Americans used to get married very young, like around 20 years old or 22. And now I think that has actually changed in recent years. Americans are, on average, are getting married at I think as late as 27 or 29, actually. It's really changed a lot. It used to be very young, but that's really changed a lot in America, honestly. So maybe in that sense, Norway and America are getting a little more similar. But that's interesting. So this entire discussion was really interesting. That was a great set of comments. Like, the Norwegians who responded here were really, really insightful. There are a lot of very small, nuanced differences in how Norwegians and Americans think about life and think about relationships and how to go about life. It's fascinating to to hear about those kind of different philosophies. And I think there's a lot of good in Norwegian culture that Americans could really learn from, like being respectful and being more of a community. Those are really great things. So I really enjoyed learning about this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Norway and Norwegian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.